Over the past 20 years, the medium known as anime has slowly but surely crept its way into the mainstream American view. The programming block of Toonami that premiered in March 17, 1997 and launched anime officially in 2000 is how many nerds, such as myself, were introduced to the genre. Anime is the new and poppin' thing. Rappers are making references to it, some even dedicating their whole brand and songs to it like Krissa SJE. Anime itself has many different genres that are available to audiences, but one genre specifically has come out on top time and time again whenever it comes to popularity and revenue, and that is what's known as shonen. There are 5 different types of anime. Kadomuke, which is aimed at young children, Shoujo, which is aimed at young women, Josei, which is more so adults as a primary focus on women, Seinen, which again is focused on adults but with more of a focus for men, then last but not least, Shonen, which is aimed at young men. Shonen is absolutely crushing the market right now. In 2023, the monthly app revenue of Shonen Jump Plus peaked at around 5 million USD in July. But why is this genre so popular compared to its peers? I want to take a look at this with you all today and break down the exact ingredients for making a good shonen and why it is so popular. Y'all can refer to me as Head Chef Daffy. Make sure you leave a like on the video and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get cooking. The protagonist. The protagonist in a shonen story is arguably the strongest factor that the medium must consistently nail whenever it presents itself to a new audience member. Relatability is a must. The author must make us as an audience care about the protagonist and actively root for them throughout the story. This is why you typically don't see very dark protagonists in the shonen medium. Tanya the Evil, Light from Death Note, Lucy from Elfen Lied, these are all protagonists who have done horrendous acts, and we as the audience are going along with the ride to see how far they can go. Specifically in Light's case, most audience members going through Death Note are waiting to see how far Light can take his Kira persona before he gets caught and his subsequent comeuppance. Now, direct compares to the shonen genre. Chihiro from Kagurabachi is on a revenge mission to find those who murdered his father. We see him execute tons of gang members in the first chapter in brutal ways, but before we see him murdering these thugs in cold blood, in the opening shot of the manga, we are in his viewpoint establishing the bond that he had with his father. We see just how close their relationship was, and we can understand how much Chihiro's father impacted his life. And throughout the story, we see over and over the content of Chihiro's character, and we see throughout this so-called edgy exterior that he has, he is a kind person in every opportunity possible. Even when Hakuri asks if he regularly saves people, Chihiro regularly says that it isn't necessarily his thing. This is the same nigga that tanked a lightning strike from Sojo to protect innocent civilians and ran himself to exhaustion trying to save hostages out of Kyora's storehouse. I don't want to fucking hear it. We want to consistently root for Chihiro throughout all of Kagurabachi, and for myself personally, I want him to move through his trauma and come out on top. Again, relatability is the #1 aspect of creating a protagonist for a shonen story. Look at Yuji. While yes, he is blessed physically, his interests don't circle around Jujutsu until he is thrown into it out of necessity to save his friend. But in the first episode, we see that he is just a regular high school kid that wants to be in his goofy paranormal club and talk about his favorite big booty white woman of the week. As a local milk commercial myself, I see the vision with Jennifer Lawrence, little bro. I ain't no shame in your game, little brother. You know what I mean? And throughout the story of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuji doesn't see himself as a prodigal son or someone destined for greatness. When he faces off against Choso and he is on the brink of defeat, he reassures himself that while it may not be him, it is okay if someone else frees Gojo. He is just another Jujutsu sorcerer in his mind, and that he needs to do all that he can and play his role just like everybody else. This is why I am a fan of the cog mentality that Yuji has. I don't like it for his character, but I like it as a story beat. I know some of y'all aren't fans of the cog mentality, but for me, it just seems a bit more realistic. Hell, when Yuji's resolve breaks in Shibuya, it wasn't as if he pulled himself up or talked himself through it. It had to be his brother Todo to get him to once again stand on his feet and tell him that not all is lost. Realistically, anybody in Yuji's position would be broken in the midst of Shibuya, and he just feels so real. A protagonist needs to lead your narrative, of course, but when it comes to shonen specifically, we as the audience need to see them grow and have a strong sense of determination, and in addition, require them to lean on other people throughout their journey. This directly transitions us to our next item for our recipe. Number 2, the cast. While the protagonist is extremely integral to forming a captivating shonen, the cast of characters around them are just as important. Very rarely can a protagonist actually be a one-man show and keep an audience's attention solely. For example, Tanjiro in Demon Slayer is one of my favorite protagonists within the past decade or so. Tanjiro has shown time and time again the ability to preserve and show that his humanity is not a weakness but rather a strength. But people don't always feel the same about Zenitsu and Inosuke. Truth be told, when I was reading through the Swordsman Village arc and I realized that Inosuke and Zenitsu were going to have almost zero presence in the midst of it, I was just... I ain't gonna fly and fuck. I was more interested in whatever Muichiro had going on than Zenitsu or Inosuke had going on personally, because they were more so played for gags and aura moments than any serious development up until that point. Zenitsu did have a small moment with Daki and they were all upset when Rigoku died, but besides that, not really. People saw Zenitsu as more of a nuisance and a gag character than somebody that actually was used to tell a story. This is all until the Infinity Castle arc, but for the sake of spoilers, I won't go into it. Compare this directly to Naruto. From the very first chapters we see Sasuke and Sakura, we see the development begin to start for them and their motivations, and we see the growth and change with them as the series continues. We see the bond that Team 7 begins to form and how the trials and tribulations that they go through did nothing but strengthen them. Look at Sakura fighting back against the Sound Ninja during the Chunin exams. Both Naruto and Sasuke are down and out, and she looks over them as they rest. Team Dosu actually pulls up and attacks the group, but Sakura does her best and attempts to fight them off, but unfortunately, she doesn't perform well. This is a huge moment for her character, because up until now, yes, she has been shown to have excellent chakra control for a genin, but she hasn't been really involved in any conflicts up until this point. But she actually tests her mettle and curses her own weakness and gives it her best shot. She ends up cutting off her own hair to escape the capture of one of the Sound Ninja, and even as a kid, I knew how cool this moment was for her. We know that Sakura holds her femininity very high. I mean, as I was going to refresh my memory on what happened in this arc specifically, there's a cover page of Sakura brushing her hair in a very ladylike fashion about 2 chapters beforehand. So for her to momentarily throw this away and prove her own strength as an individual in this current predicament is powerful, man. And she shows tremendous courage in this fight as she gives the Sound Ninja the runaround. She tanks these kunai directly to her body and she bites down on Zaku for as long as she can while he beats her viciously until help finally arrives from Team Shikamaru. And throughout the series, we see that Sakura actually doesn't totally forego her sense of femininity, but in the first arc of Shippuden, she shows just how much she has grown by facing off against Sasori. Really, even earlier when she's doing the bell exercise with Naruto and Kakashi and they're shocked by her quote-unquote monstrous strength. Throwing a strong emphasis on your supporting cast like this can definitely elevate a shonen story. While yes, it is just an ingredient for good storytelling regardless of genre, it cannot for different reasons. Shikamaru damn near had a whole arc dedicated entirely to him in Shippuden, and honestly, if this was anyone else, I don't think the arc would be positively remembered as it is now. Imagine this shit with like Kiba, like no one's trying to see that, man. But Naruto himself was barely present in that arc because he was trained to craft the Rasen Shuriken, and Shikamaru's emotional turmoil carried that arc from front to back. The anime only scene of Shikamaru and his father playing shogi, and his father tells him to take all of the pain and anger that he is holding in, and he tells him to let it out so that he can finally begin to heal. Just, beautiful addition to the story in my personal opinion. While some shonen have extremely large casts such as Bleach or One Piece, you must have the ability to have proper motivations and emotional attachment to these characters in order to have something substantial. But now that we have established that a strong cast of characters is necessary, let's move on to our next ingredient. Up next, power systems. This is one of the shonen genre's strongest assets. This is also one of the most recognizable traits of anime as a whole. Ki, Nen, Chakra, Curse Energy, Stando Power! All these things are structured frameworks for how characters use their abilities. They can provide avenues for interesting fights as well as additional lore and world building. Everybody loves fights and shows. John Wick, for example, are fantastic action movies with gorgeous set pieces and great direction, but what would happen if John Wick only disposed of his enemies with his pistol? It could be very easy to say the gunfights could get boring, and it would be a harsher task on the director to come up with more creative ways. That is why John Wick uses a variety of weapons throughout the films. Pencils, flamethrowers, his car, stairs. Bro, he broke a nigga's neck with a fucking encyclopedia, like the whole Merriam-Webster just proof that knowledge is power, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, this is why power systems are important. They allow for fresh fights to be made up and allow creativity for the author to use. Domain expansions and cursed energy as a whole is one of Jujutsu Kaisen's biggest strengths. The power system of JJK is so intricate and there are so many rules that it is hard sometimes to not get lost and understand that there is a lot at play in these higher level fights. Now yes, sometimes you have shenanigans such as binding vows that people aren't fans of, but even small things such as simple domains can have a huge impact on a battle. The Black Flash, which is the equivalent of landing a critical hit in a video game, blew me away the first time I saw it, because it isn't something that can happen on purpose. It is purely luck based. It isn't something that can be mastered. Domain expansions, a staple of the series, is one of the most interesting aspects of JJK, because you can do so many interesting and creative things at your disposal when it comes to these techniques and amping them up. Heavy spoiler for JJK, so please click ahead if you wish to not be spoiled with the timestamp on screen. With Naoya's domain expansion, we know that he is one of the fastest sorcerers in the series, and even more so when he's in his cursed form. But to have his domain expansion be in the shape of a uterus, in direct irony with his blatant misogynistic attitude, is actually pretty cool in my opinion. Then to play on his speed aspect of his kit and require those who are caught in his domain expansion to move in direct accordance with the 24 FPS rule of projection sorcery to avoid the short hit effect is so f***ing awesome, man. I miss JJK. Can you tell? Stands in JoJo are a great power system, and Araki is unmatched in creativity he uses in the fights he has his characters engage in. Part 6 and Part 7 is where Araki starts going balls to the walls and left me scratching my head as I was going through some of these fights. Look at Part 6 when Jolene is fighting Sea Moon. Sea Moon has the ability of surface inversion, meaning it can modify the gravity of anything that it touches, so it can invert it, or turn it inside out rather. Jolene ends up taking a direct blow to her body from Sea Moon, and Pucci thinks that he finally has her beat. Her heart is going to be turned inside out is what he thinks is going to happen. But after doing a bit of trolling against Pucci, we see that Jolene has formed a Mobius strip with her stand on her body, making the effects of Sea Moon go in an infinite loop throughout the threads on her body, as if there are no end point for it to go. This is the creativity I'm talking about, which you can do with power systems. I mean, I could go into the whole who shot Johnny Joestar fight, but that would take way too long. If fans on my channel talk about flying about JoJo, let's be honest. Power systems as a whole can be a direct representation of the growth that a character is making both narratively and physically. Ichigo at the beginning of Bleach is shown to have immense spiritual pressure, but isn't refined. It is more like a blunt club rather than a precise stab with a knife. Then, as the series goes on, Ichigo gains a better understanding of who he is as an individual and as a soul reaper. We see this best reflected when he finally understands the true nature of his Zanpakuto and why Zangetsu looks so similar to Yhwach. In the final battle of the series, it all culminates in, well, I'll let anime onlys wait and find out in the last court just that looks like. And I have very good faith that Suya Peria will deliver for that, so stay tuned for that. For the next ingredient of a good shonen, I thought I would like to introduce another expert in the field who loves Kagurabachi almost as much as I do. Almost, ladies and gentlemen. Almost. Everybody, please welcome Weeb to the channel. No, not fake Weeb, the one with the accent.
Hey man, what the fuck? Yeah, it's me, the Weeb, the one with the accent, not the fake one. Anyways, Daffy brought me up here to give my expert opinion on what it means to have good world building within Shonen. And I think when it comes to world building, I'd argue that this step in the cooking process is almost as important as the characters, as the cast of the world itself. You see, the difference between a good and a great manga for me personally is how the world is constructed. Let's use some recent examples. Jujutsu Kaisen by Gege Akutami is a series set in modern day Japan that follows sorcerers who are fighting cases. We know those cases originate from negative emotion, meaning as long as Twitter exists, those cases they're never going away. Now, but Jujutsu Kaisen, its world building, it's pretty okay. Gege, as an author, wanted more emphasis on the power system than the world and the characters themselves, but through that very same power system, he's able to give us a brief glimpse of the lore and the world of Jujutsu Kaisen, for case in point here, the fabled Heian era, which in realistic terms and totality, we have absolutely bare minimum information on, except for the fact that it happened at some point, and the fact that it happened now holds some sort of weight and sway over the modern day events that are currently happening that we follow within the story. Outside of small and minor references to this era and maybe even some small flashback references scattered throughout the series, it's very rarely mentioned, but this acts as sort of a double-edged sword for Gege. On one end of the blade, Gege stabs us with intrigue, luster, mystery, and a world gone by, one that we know holds weight over the current one, but we'll never sort of know. And on the other end of that blade, Gege stabs himself. For the exact same reasons that I mentioned earlier, by not giving the readers more of that world that he has built up, even if it's not entirely necessary to the plot or overall story, everyone who has read Jujutsu Kaisen is in full agreement that the High arc is intriguing enough to be its own series or its own arc in general. And ultimately, it all comes down to what the author wants to do with this story. The expression less is more comes to mind, especially when it comes to Jujutsu Kaisen here. It's a double-edged sword. Gege's created something intriguing, but he gives us less of it, and that's technically more, because it creates intrigue and it keeps us coming back because it's a case of what if? What if he does do it? What if he doesn't? But then it leads into the discussion of, oh, well, disappointment because he didn't. But tough luck. But then on the other hand, you can look at worlds like Hunter x Hunter, One Piece, that are vast, expansive, and rich in lore. I can show you just 2 panels from both series here that have spawned an endless amount of conversation on content and theories and conspiracies to go along with them. Like, for example, this panel from Hunter x Hunter showing a map of the Dark Continent, and in the center, the land that we know and have explored for the entirety of the series is this little tiny little dot. And to an excruciating level of pain and suffering, but even within the more recent Succession contest arc, currently, Togashi's world building is insane. We learn so much about the characters, the places they're from, the customs that the characters engage in, the political goals and endeavors of these characters, all while moving through the vast expansive ocean towards that same fabled Dark Continent that one panel spawned all those theories about. And Togashi fills his world with just little nuggets of intrigue in the exact same way Oda sets up his world with multiple islands for the Straw Hats to take on. Each land has its own race, its own language, its own cultures, its own history, and its own stories. And realistically, One Piece is sort of set up in a way that you could probably read each and every arc individually and maybe just put it down at the end of it, and it's just like a nice little saga of a story that you get to enjoy, because these are all isolated worlds, but each self-contained story connects in this interweaving web of stories and plot points and subplot points that all help build the world of One Piece. But One Piece is a unique breed. Oda has been working on this series more time than some of you watching right now have actually been alive, and that's an insane feat. And through this longevity, Oda has crafted a masterful world that will stand the test of time, and long after its completion, long after the fall of Rome, long after the fall of society, people will look to the textbooks of One Piece as literature. Probably, I don't know, fucking know. But longevity doesn't exactly correlate to quote-unquote good world building, because more recent example that I have read recently was actually Gachi Akuta. Now, the series is only 140 plus chapters, and I'm about 20 chapters deep right now. It's a series that follows Rudo, who was cast from his home after being framed and blamed for the murder of a father figure and a friend. Now, within this first chapter, it sets up some very crucial plot points and serious elements within this story. It sets up a cultural divide within its world, a side where the populace is hyper-cleanly and a side that not so much. But not only is this world filled with ruins and garbage piles, it's also filled with graffiti and artwork, and it's these little pieces that make the world feel alive. It feels lived in. So when you look at these other series around this that don't engage in this, it feels like the series has no culture behind it. It feels like it has nothing there. It's just an empty slate just for our characters to exist in. And while it's not shonen, Heavenly Delusion does this exact same sort of thing. The world feels alive. It feels lived in. There's graffiti on the walls, and if you look close enough, all of the graffiti all points to a bigger problem, a bigger plot point within the world, and it doesn't hold your hand while it's walking you through these points. And I think that's what makes for really good world building. But ultimately, world building within shonen and just manga in general is just a massive and complex target to hit, and some authors hit it perfectly, and others leave us with but a taste that sinks in the hook, leaving us wanting more.
Absolutely massive shout out to Weeb for popping in on this video of mine. Please make sure y'all pop in over on his channel and show him some love. He is approaching 40,000 subs, and y'all would absolutely love his content. So please go and throw a sub his way and leave a like on some of his videos if you'd like to. Coming up next, the fights. Arguably the biggest selling point of mainstream shonen are the spectacle and creativity with the fights. Conflicts in shonen are almost always solved with fights between characters rather than diplomacy. Fights in shonen will often try to sell a message or a theme rather than just be flashy nonsense, or exist sheerly for spectacle. They exist to move the plot forward. For example, Endeavor fighting for his life against the Hayanobu looked absolutely fucking phenomenal. Oh my god. Yo, they was cooking on this episode. Woo! But throughout this fight, Endeavor sees himself within this Nobu as how he used to be, a creature obsessed with nothing but strength and gathering the perfect quirks. Note, this is before the Endeavor Agency arc, but this is where, for a lot of people, Endeavor started to win them over with his redemption, as he internally condemns his previous actions when he is fighting with this high-end Nomu. Look at how with One Piece, as throughout Arlong Park, we gabble with themes of racial tension and child exploitation. But a big one for myself is the acknowledgement acknowledgement that there is no such thing as a one-man show and to know your respective strength and weaknesses. Luffy outright tells Arlong that he may not know a lot of things, but it doesn't matter because he's still to become a great pirate anyway. He says, I can't cook, I can't tell lies, I know I can't live without help from a lot of people. Arlong laughs in his face and he asks him, well, just what can you do? And Luffy says, I can be you. Talk to that nigga, man. Talk. Get up in that man's face. Luffy is a good leader because he knows it's impractical to try to do everything alone. And this goes for anything in your own life. The best thing you can do, if possible, is lean on other people and acknowledge that some people can do things that you simply cannot. And that is more than all right. Even look at Naruto in part 1 when Gaara was wreaking havoc during the Chunin exams. We have seen Gaara kill people multiple times over at this point, and he damn near killed Rock Lee in his match against him. But when Naruto gets a chance to fight him and Naruto actually ends up winning the fight, we see that Naruto isn't exactly excited that he neutralized the threat, but he actually cries for Gaara. Naruto grew up disturbingly similar to Gaara, and all he knew in his heart is that he could have turned out the very same way if not for his friends. There's obviously a weight to this fight, and its resolution serves the overall story well. When Gaara comes to Lee's rescue in his fight against Kimimaro, it's hype, and we as the audience want to see how Gaara has succumbed to Naruto's influence. Shonen battles serve as a vehicle for character development, and the main characters get stronger through training, determination, and emotional breakthroughs. Gohan going Super Saiyan 2 is a direct reflection of this. Gohan inadvertently let Android 16 get killed by Cell and allow the Z-Fighters to be in harm's way because he didn't want to run the risk of losing control of his power and putting everyone in harm's way. Shonen battles mostly have well-defined power systems, while superhero comics in the West can vary wildly from issue to issue as there are dozens of continuities and feats to pull from for individual characters. An example of this would be the origin of Spider-Man's powers and the existence of other spider people. In some continuities, it was random chance that a spider bit Peter Parker and drove him down the road of being a superhero, but in others, there's this concept of the web of life and Madam Web who introduced an aspect of fate to Spider-Man that he was always destined for it. Then we start introducing Morlun and the animal totems and multiverse nonsense. It's just it's horseshit. It's bad. It's really bad. Anyway, shonen fights are commonly tied to emotional stakes like revenge, overcoming your limits, etc., while in seinen they are philosophical and brutal, or question morality, such as Attack on Titan. Spectacle is a major addition to shonen as well, with the over-the-top or reality-breaking effects present compared to more grounded brutality like seinen or comic book movies, which can generally gap the distance between suspension of disbelief and something you think could happen in real life, such as Iron Man or Captain America and how they engage in combat. Shonen protagonists frequently win their fights by unlocking their hidden potential through emotions like friendship, rage, or even an entire flashback of a seemingly inconsequential memory such as Demon Slayer. This is definitely the weakest part of the shonen genre to me, as I typically prefer when characters win fights with cunning and creativity rather than an emotional response. It's part of the reason why I don't really like Ichigo's fights when I go through Bleach. As a protagonist, love him. That's my guy. Zero complaints. But when Ichigo goes through all of his battles, it's just mostly sheer brute force and willpower, except the very last fight of the series, but I can't spoil y'all on that, obviously. But it's just frustrating for me personally. Up next, the villains. Shonen villains are usually introduced in a power hierarchy, with the villains getting stronger as the series continues on, such as in Dragon Ball, where Demon King Piccolo was a very large and looming threat. Then you hop on over to the Buu Saga, and Super Buu manages to kill everybody on Earth in just a few minutes. Seinen villains can remain unbeatable or immensely overpowering throughout the entire series. In traditional comic books in America, villains can be interchanged in and out depending on what the writer writing the story felt like that day. Shonen villains usually reflect a hero's flaws, struggles, or are a direct reflection of the protagonist if they were to have a different past. Shigaraki from My Hero Academia is a direct failure of hero society as well as Endeavor. Endeavor's drive to surpass the #1 hero led him to become a horribly abusive father and husband. Of course, I must bring up my glorious king, Ryomen Sukuna, who was feared amongst all sorcerers in the world of JJK. And if they weren't fearing him, they were glazing the holy shit out of him. Like, he was that, bruh. He was him. But I love Sukuna and Yuji's dynamic because it flips the trope of the inner demon aiding the protagonist as the story goes on, and Yuji and Sukuna actually despise each other more and more as the series continues. It's why I love Yuji's performance in Shinjuku, especially because throughout the series, Sukuna has looked down on Yuji for his weakness and belittled him every second they spent together. Then we actually have Yuji, little old Yuji Itadori, doing his very best in putting up LeBron numbers in the war of attrition in Shinjuku for Megumi's soul. Dude, the hype I felt seeing Yuji do his best and scraping by with nothing but sheer grit and determination while trying to save his friend's soul hit me different. Sukuna, release Fushiguro, return to my body and I will spare your life. My Jimmy's tight, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I really like their dynamic. And you see a lot of this within Shonen with long-running rivalries between the protagonists and antagonists. They usually aren't one-off villains, and you can usually detect who is going to be a long-running foil to the protagonist and stay around for a decent bit, such as Hirohiko from Kagurabachi. Shonen villains are typically dramatic and charismatic, and they love to monologue. While shonen villains usually outclass the hero in power, Western films have the villains accomplish their goals through tactics and are usually a lot more psychological in their approach. Even look at Hiro from Inuyashiki, who is a serial killer who is just bored of his own existence and killing is the only thing that excites him. Unlike Sukuna, who sees killing people as a game and he still is a cannibal, Sukuna, that we've been shown, only kills people who provide him a challenge or stand in his way. Hiro kills for pleasure, to see something die, to see the life leave someone's eyes, and Sukuna doesn't do that. Sukuna has a very particular beat of his own drum, but Hiro has zero moral compass. Hell, Sukuna even gives Maki her own flowers along with Hiruma, but Hiro does nothing of the sort. Do you see the difference that I'm talking about? Whew, yeah, oh man, we went over a lot, didn't we? Good lord. Now, we have looked through all of these reasons, and ultimately, I hope you leave this video having a better understanding of what makes a high-quality, top-tier shonen, and I hope you can identify a good one from a bad one in your own personal preferences, of course. I have been reading shonen anime and manga since about 2010, since I was 10 years old, and I absolutely love the genre. I will love it when I get old, when I'm 80, 90 years old, I'm still screaming in my microphone about Kagurabachi chapter 2000, you know. But yeah, man, I just love me some good shonen. I know you guys enjoy it as well. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think makes for a high quality top tier shonen. I'm very curious to see what you guys think down below. Of course, huge thanks for Weeb for popping in for the channel. Please make sure you guys throw him a like and leave him a sub as well. And yeah, it's been your boy Daffy, guys. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this video. Please make sure you take care of yourselves and have a damn good one. Peace.